thank you very much, and thanks to the organizing committee for the opportunity to present the results. So today I will try to show you how we can obtain some atomic scale detail on the mechanisms of anionic substitution in some minerals. And my talk will mostly focus on the carbonate for phosphate substitution in apatite group minerals. And I have added some slides on the sulfate substitution in also carbonate group minerals. These results have been obtained by an interdisciplinary team composed of EMPMC with expertise in mineralogy and solid-state physics, ESTEP, which brings expertise on geology and geochemistry, and LCM-CEPI with expertise in solid-state chemistry and a lot of NMR spectroscopy, and also collaboration with SEMT on high-field NMR spectroscopy. So in the first part, we will discuss mostly about carbonate substitution in apatite, because as you know, carbonate is a very important impurity in apatite because you can tune the macroscopic properties of the material depending on the content of carbonate impurity. But from our point of view, it is also an important marker of past environments, because you can measure the isotopic composition of carbon and oxygen of carbonate impurities in apatite and record some information on past environments. And the basic question in this approach is that you have to be sure that what you are measuring in the fossil corresponds to what occurred during the life of the animal. And we are mostly interested in the transformation of the biologic material during fossilization and during the geological times. And an interesting property also of carbonate is that it presents very localized vibrational modes at high frequency. So you can use infrared active vibrational modes, and in particular this vibrational mode in which the carbon atom moves perpendicularly to the carbonate plane, and this relatively weak band is not affected by macroscopic electrostatic effects, and it is a real probe of the microscopic atomic scale modification of the structure. And if you observe the infrared spectra of various samples from biomaterial, recent material, and fossil samples, fossil enamel samples, you can observe significant variations of the local environment of the carbonate group, depending on the enrichment in a fluorine. And the appearance of this new signal here, which is really close to what is observed in the carbonate fluorapatite, geologic carbonate fluorapatite, okay, is clear evidence for deep transformation of the material. And in my talk, I will mostly focus on the origin and significance of this signal. Indeed, if we consider the crystal chemistry of impurities in apatite, the apatite structure displays various potential sites for substitution or modification. And in most cases, the incorporation sites of impurities are well identified. For instance, cationic substitutions can affect the calcium sites. And in that case, we have some semi-empirical models that can be used to, for instance, predict the partition coefficients of these impurities. Tetrahedral molecular groups can also substitute for phosphate groups at the B site here. And also, you can observe various anionic substitution in the channel sites, here the A sites. Quite interestingly, in fact, is that the carbonate for phosphate substitution in the tetrahedral site has to meet with you have to answer two questions about this substitution. The first thing is that you have to incorporate a triangular molecule in a tetrahedral site, so you have some geometrical difference between the impurity and the crystal site. And also you have to comply with some difference in electrostatic charge, and so you have to have information on the electrostatic charge balance mechanism. And because of these two difficulties, the real microscopic structure of the carbonate site in fluorapatite has been debated for almost 50 years. And also, we will try to determine what is the significance of the appearance of this signal in the fossils. Concerning the tools on our approach, we are trying to combine solid-state spectroscopy, mostly in the present talk, low-temperature transmission Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy, nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, and we will try to combine these experimental tools with some ab initio modeling of carbonate defects at the density functional theory level using national computing facilities. Okay. And I will mostly present experimental results on some reference sample of carbonate fluoroapatite, which is also called a francolite. And this sample comes from, it is a natural sample from Senegal. It contains some weight % of carbonate and few % of other mineral impurities. Now, if we have a look at the low temperature Fourier transform infrared spectrum of this sample using quite conventional transmission measurements, you of course observe the various absorption bands corresponding to the internal modes of the molecular groups. And if we focus on this peculiar mode that still correspond to the motion of the carbon atom perpendicular to the triangular plane, okay, we can see that here the spectrum is in fact dominated by this very narrow signal. Okay, so the spectrum indicates that you have a major contribution of B-type carbonite, about 70%. And also a very interesting observation is that at low temperatures, the line width is really narrow, about few centimeters to the -1, which is a clear indication that carbonates occur in a defect site, but with a very well-defined geometry. Okay. So we can gain some complementary information from nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, in which you can probe the local environment of the carbon, for instance, using carbon-14 NMR spectroscopy. And here again, you observe a single signal, an asymmetric signal, which is a clear indication that here again you have a major contribution of B-type carbonite, which is fully consistent with the infrared spectroscopy results. Okay. More interesting is that also you can probe the environment of the fluorine. And concerning the fluorine, you observe a major signal here, quite broadened, but major signal which is related to the channel sites, the fluorine in the channel sites of the apatite. But more surprisingly, you observe a second site, okay, which does not correspond, which corresponds to a second environment of fluorine in this sample. And this second signal was previously observed by these authors, but was not clearly interpreted. Okay. And this is very significant because it corresponds to about 8 to 10% of the total fluorine content. And using more advanced nuclear magnetic resonance techniques, you can probe the interaction of this second environment of fluorine with its surrounding. So here, using double quantum, single quantum NMR spectroscopy, you can see, of course, that the channel fluorine ions can see other channel fluorine ions. They interact. Also, the additional signal can couple with the channel ions. That indicates that this second fluorine environment do occur in the apatite structure. But the interesting point is that the second fluorine environment does not interact with other ions in the same environment. That is clear indication that the second fluorine environment corresponds to isolated point defect in the apatite structure. Okay, and now by looking at the transfer of magnetization between fluorine and carbon, Franck Fayon has been able to determine that the second environment of fluorine ions was located close to carbon atoms in the apatite structure, and he has been able to estimate the distance between the fluorine ions and the carbon atoms at about 2.7 angstrom. Okay? So starting from this experimental observation, we tried to determine the molecular environment of carbonate from a molecular point of view. And to that purpose, we used some quantum mechanical modeling techniques that provide the total energy of the system for a given atomic configuration. And here, we have tested various atomic configurations. And here, I'm showing you the most stable one that corresponds to a stable defect arrangement in the apatite structure. And this is a stable one at the density functional theory level, okay, using the quantum espresso package. And for these defects, okay, here you have the tetrahedral sites, and the carbonate group occupies the sloping face, the basal sloping face of the tetrahedron, whereas the additional fluorine that is compensating the electrostatic charge of the carbonate group occupies the remaining apex of the tetrahedral site. Okay, so initially you had some phosphate site here, and now you have this kind of defects of clumped chemical defects. And the theoretical distance here between the carbon and the fluorine is in reasonable agreement with what is experimentally measured, because we find a distance of 2.5 angstrom, but of course, you have no direct bonding between this fluorine and the carbon here. Okay, so now starting from this model, we are able to compute the spectroscopic properties corresponding to this model to compare with experimental observation. So concerning the Fourier transform infrared spectra, we can compute theoretical spectra from derivative of the total energy of the system with respect to atomic displacements or the application of an electric field. Okay, so here you have the experimental spectrum, and here the calculated spectrum. Of course, the major vibrational bands are quite well reproduced in the theoretical spectrum compared to the experimental spectrum. There is a small slight shift, systematic shift between the theory and the experiment, because in the theory we have no adjustable parameters. Okay, so there is some systematic difference, but the relative frequencies, in particular the relative frequencies between these two bands, nicely match the experimental observation, and also the splitting of the stretching CO bands is quite correctly reproduced. And from this kind of theoretical observation, we have been able also to show that these bands are affected by macroscopic electrostatic effects. That means that the position of these bands could depend on factors such as the carbonate concentration, the particle shapes, and so on. And this explains why these bands are always much more narrow than these stretching bands. Okay, so this is for the infrared spectroscopy, but we have been also able to compute the NMR chemical shift, okay, still using the same theoretical framework. So for the carbon-13, we find here the theoretical signal corresponding to the carbonate here, so to the carbon here, which is of course close to the experimental signal, but in this case the distinction between B site and A site is not obvious because they occur in quite a narrow range. Concerning the fluorine signals, the channel fluorine ions, F1 and F2, give these two signals as expected for the channel ions. So this, and the fact that these two ions gives a different chemical shifts could contribute to explain the broadening of this line. Okay, but very interesting was the fact that this additional fluorine, the second environment of the fluorine ion, gives this theoretical chemical shifts that is not far from the experimental observation. So in our opinion, both NMR and infrared spectroscopy validate the defect model that we propose here. Okay. So concerning this clumped chemical defect model, we can ask whether this type of chemical defects is an exception or a rule. And in fact, in a completely another world compared with biominerals. Okay, in high temperature minerals, almost at the same time, we also found very similar defects. Okay, in this mineral, which is a silicate, a magnesium silicate, and in this mineral, we found some substitution, silicate substitution here by clumped OH and fluorine defects, and also we found a very similar configuration compared here to apatite. Here we have the substitution of borate anions, and here you have a compensating hydroxyl group. Okay, but here in that case in a high temperature mineral. Okay, so our feeling is that in fact the important thing here is that the rule is for the local charge, electrostatic charge compensation of the defects, and it seems that it's a general features for these heterovalent molecular substitutions. Okay, so at this point, we can also wonder whether such kind of defects would also apply to hydroxyapatite. Okay, because some clumped carbonate hydroxyl defect could be also meet the requirements that I mentioned for fluoroapatite, and also fluorine for hydroxyl substitution is commonly observed in minerals. So we have investigated various configurations of clumped carbonate hydroxyls in apatite structure. But in fact, from a thermodynamical point of view, this kind of defect is not favored, and the favored defect is a fluorinated white, and it is significantly favored compared to the hydroxylated defects. And the reason for this difference is that in this configuration, you can't achieve an efficient hydrogen bonding between this hydroxyl and other oxygen atoms of the structure. So from a thermodynamical point of view, this kind of defect cannot apply to hydroxyapatite. So to conclude about the incorporation of carbonate the incorporation of carbonate in apatite, I think that we found some conclusive evidence that you really have some local charge compensation of B-type carbonate defect by fluorine ions. And now we have really efficient spectroscopic markers of the transformation of enamel during geological processes. And this transformation is mostly occurs through dissolution precipitation mechanisms, and this is clearly attested here by a electronic microscope micrograph obtained on a highly altered enamel sample, in which you can see the replacement here of the biological structure by this filling of fluoroapatite. And the important information you can gain here is that the carbonate groups are really incorporated in the newly formed fluoroapatite. Okay? And this could be a clue to explain that despite this strong evidence for alteration, it seems that in the samples from these environments, the isotopic composition of carbonate group preserves some information about the ecological features of the various animals analyzed. So now I turn to the to few slides about the second part of the talk, which relates to a question that is quite similar from a crystal chemical point of view. And this question is the mechanism of sulfate substitution in carbonate group minerals, because we know that marine calcium carbonates can contain up to about 1% of sulfate groups. And the sulfur sulfite isotopic composition can be used to trace the balance, the global balance on the Earth's surface between reduced and oxidized form of sulfur along the Phanerozoic geological times. And it is interesting to note that initially in the literature, people were using this kind of denomination, structurally substituted sulfate, but in more recent studies, they used carbonate-associated sulfate because they had no direct evidence for the real incorporation of this sulfate in the carbonate group minerals. And indeed, this substitution requires the replacement of some triangular group by a tetrahedral group. Okay? So we try to address this question but using still theoretical tools. And we investigated various models of sulfate incorporation in the major polymorphs of calcium carbonates. So using first principles quantum mechanical calculations. In most of the cases, we observe some counting of the sulfate groups with respect to the orientation of the initial orientation of the carbonate groups, and some, of course, some significant structural distortion around the sulfate group that can be then related to the compatibility of sulfate with the carbonate structure. And it seems that sulfate is more easily incorporated in vaterite or calcite and much less easily in aragonite. These results obtained at the Dentici functional theory are mostly consistent with the previous studies by Fernandez-Diaz et al. Who were using empirical potential modeling, except that concerning vaterite, we did not confirm we did not observe any stabilizing effect of sulfite at low concentration in vaterite. Okay. So starting from these models, it is now possible to compute also the vibrational properties corresponding to this model and compare to experimental observations if they exist. Okay. So concerning the frequency of the vibrational modes, here we have computed in red the vibrational frequencies of the sulfate in calcite, and we also computed the vibrational frequencies for isolated SO2 molecule on anhydrite. Okay, so I have already told you there is some systematic shift between experimental theory because of the theoretical level, theoretical approximations that we are using, but you can observe that for sulfate in calcite, we have some experimental information about the vibrational frequencies of the sulfate group in calcite, and the theoretical frequencies clearly match the experimental one within experimental or theoretical accuracy. So I think that the comparison on experimental frequency supports indeed the substitution of sulfate groups in calcite, and structurally substituted sulfite is, of course, in the end an acceptable designation. Okay. And the second point is that from the vibrational frequencies, we are able to compute the free energy difference related to the isotopic substitution, the replacement of sulfur 32 by sulfur 34. On what we obtain using that is that indeed the equilibrium isotopic fractionation, so the difference here in the various curves is small among the various sulfate species, and the major control on isotopic composition is indeed related to redox change. Here we have incorporated the results of another study by another groups on the aqueous sulfate. So maybe there is a small fractionation here, but I think that the modeling of sulfate in solution has still to be improved to be really sure about this kind of fractionation. So to conclude, I would say that now what we want to do is to better associate this atomic scale insight in the status of impurities in biominerals to more mesoscopic approaches, and probably to include more biology. And also I think that the coupling of isotopic chemistry with detailed crystal chemical investigation is a promising direction to obtain new information on ancient environments. And also it's quite an advertisement, but I think that the density functional theory-based methods are really an efficient framework to combine and to reconcile experimental information obtained using different techniques on complex real materials such as biominerals. So I would like to thank the funding organization, and I would like just to add a small information for the PhD students who are in the room, is that they are welcome to apply to the prize of the French Mineralogical Society on this year, because this is mineralogy in the broadest sense. And this year, Julie Kosmidis has won the prize with a thesis on biomineralization of calcium phosphate and iron phosphate. So really in the field that we are interested in today. So I thank you for your attention.